Back for another edition of Drop the Mic, and we're starting to run out of comedy specials to review. No reviews today. I do have some news and some other shit I want to get to, but no reviews. So I guess if you guys like the reviews and you want me to review old specials, or if you have some that you think I haven't seen, let me know. Let me know where I can find them at Drop the Mic YT or at Blind Mike _ on Twitter, and just let me know. But I do kind of like the episodes without reviews a little better. They're a little more free, but I do like recommending you guys specials to check out as well. So maybe we'll get back to that at some point. Although I think Netflix is starting to run out of shit. I guess that kind of leads me to one of the bits of news I saw over the week that there are rumors. Donnell Rollins told reporters that Dave Chappelle's July 4th party might be released on Netflix. And I mean, if Dave Chappelle did it with the idea that it could be released on Netflix in mind, I'm sure it's done well. But I don't know. Do I want to see a bunch of celebrities at Dave Chappelle's house? I don't know how I feel about it. Like I said, I trust Chappelle. I don't think he would put out anything corny or anything over the top Hollywood. I don't think Chappelle would really do that. But I did find it interesting that and it kind of shows you how Netflix is running out of stuff. I'm sure they have some comedy specials backlogged, like we talked about Jim Jeffries last week. That was recorded in November, so I'm sure they could make it another, I don't know, month maybe with what they've got recorded. But they don't have a lot. It's going to be interesting to see what, not just Netflix, but it's going to be really interesting to see what cable stations and networks start putting out. That's going to be brutal. But I guess keep an eye out for Chappelle's stuff. But the thing I meant to get to this last week, and I'm kind of glad I forgot to mention it because this week's episode was more interesting. So if you guys don't know, I haven't heard about this. The only reason I know about it is Louis C.K.'s mailing list. No press about this or anything, but Louis C.K. is doing a podcast. It's a 10-episode series, and if you watched his special that I reviewed, you would know that he's in love now. He found love in France. So I guess he's got a girlfriend that he's deeply in love with. And the podcast is basically just calls between Louis and his girlfriend in France. And even the way they kind of advertise it in the email is it's basically just what we would talk about on our phone calls. So I would say if you're not a Louis C.K. fan, if you've never been a fan of his, you're not going to like this. But if you are, it's kind of cool to hear just Louis doing something creative again. The girlfriend she's kind of funny. She's got a little bit of an annoying laugh, but maybe I'm being too critical. But, Louis could just do this on his own. But it's nice that he has someone to bounce off of and all that. But really, I think what's interesting is Louis trying to be funny again. He's making fun of jerking off. He's making fun of women. He's talking about that kind of stuff. It's a very interesting comeback because he's not trying to come back to where he was before. He's not doing an apology tour. He's not trying to get back in the good graces of the people he was once friends with. He was kind of in that elite crowd, you forget, with Louis. And he was the guy that everyone said it's okay if he makes rape jokes or if he says the N-word on stage. He kind of got grandfathered in for some reason. And then all of a sudden that was all wiped away. But Louis doesn't give a shit about that. Not apologizing or anything. But the reason I'm glad I didn't bring it up last week is because I listened to the most recent episode that was put out this week. And Louis C.K. kind of discusses, we can't play the clip because I would have had to make Justin pay for it, and it's not really worth it. It's $5, but I think it would have got taken down off YouTube as well. Can't find the clip anywhere. So I don't know if people just haven't picked up on this or just not that many people are listening to the podcast. But for the first time ever, even in the special, Louis doesn't really address his controversy in the way he does on this episode. And I thought it was kind of cool. He talks about his mom's reaction to the New York Times article and the masturbation scandal and all that. And he kind of mocks his mother for supporting him and admits there's more layers to it than maybe some of the people that support him are taking into consideration. And it was just interesting to hear him talk about that. So if you're a Louis fan that doesn't know about this, I think it's worth the $5, even just for that episode. But in general, if you kind of miss Louis and liked hearing him talk, I think it's worth $5 to check out. Like I said, if you weren't already a Louis fan, you're not gonna find this is not gonna change your mind by any means. You're not gonna all of a sudden say, "Oh, well, he's very sorry," and he's if you hate Louis, you're gonna continue to hate Louis for this. Um, and I think if you were lukewarm on Louis, like if you like to stand up, but you weren't crazy about him, I don't think this is gonna put you over the edge either. You might be a little bored by it. But if you like what Louis does, if you like him just conversational, I think it's worth checking out. And like I said, if you want to hear him talk about the that New York Times story in a way he hasn't really, it's not very long. He doesn't spend a lot of time on it, but it was interesting to hear him do that for the first time. And it was strange to me that no one really covered it. But again, I think it's because not a lot of people are necessarily paying for that podcast. So I want to get to this Nick Cannon stuff as well in a second, but first I'll give you one other podcast recommendation. If you want to check out an episode of a guy that really needs my help, you probably wouldn't know about him if I didn't recommend him, but it's called the Joe Rogan Experience. He actually did a pretty good episode with a guy I'm not a huge fan of, but Bob Saget. I think he's better. I think Saget is better in this type of setting. So if you're like me and you would be if you would run away from a Bob Saget podcast, actually check this one out. It's worth a listen. They get into some interesting stories, but the reason I checked it out is because I saw a headline. This was odd for I think it might have been the New York Post that covered it, and I thought it was odd that they were covering an episode of Rogan. You don't see that a lot. But they talked about how Rogan got into the Carlos Mencia stuff. Rogan and Saget talked about how Carlos Mencia was treated and what Rogan thinks of him now and all that. And I was like, the New York Post is covering this. I got to listen. So I went through, and it wasn't really anything I hadn't heard before. But I will say it got me to look up some Carlos Mencia stuff. Mencia was trying to make a comeback over the last couple of years. And I found an interview he did in 2019 where Mencia kind of calls Rogan a bully and says that he never stole jokes, which is odd because Mencia didn't admit to stealing jokes. So it is an interesting scandal to look into. If you get some time, I would say maybe do some digging on that if you're interested in it. But all around, even without the Mencia stuff, I thought the Rogan Saget interview was pretty interesting. They get into a lot of comedy related stuff and not a lot of not comedy related stuff. So check it out if you think you'd be a fan. Now, this Nick Cannon thing was a big controversy throughout the week. I had a hot take on it on the Kirk Minahan show because my logic is, and you'll find this hard to believe, people, but maybe I didn't articulate my point very well when I was arguing with Kirk and Steve about this. But my take with Nick Cannon is simply this. He shouldn't, if he's going to be the host of America's Got Talent and the host of The Masked Singer and Wild and Out and these family-friendly shows, then the network should go to him and say, we don't want you doing podcasts. We don't want you doing fucking rap. We don't want you doing stand-up. We want you to be a clean-cut guy. We want you to have a Ryan Seacrest type image. And the reason I keep using Ryan Seacrest as the example is because Ryan Seacrest is perfect at it. You've never heard of Ryan, well, I take that back. You may have heard a couple Ryan Seacrest controversies, but it seems like he tries to live a pretty clean-cut life. And I think that's what you have to be. You have to be a mindless teleprompter reader to be the host of American Idol or Kelly and Ryan or any of these type of shows. You can't have opinions. You can't have strong opinions. But if the networks want to hire a guy who's attempting to have opinions, then you kind of got to let that fly. So I'm going to show you examples of who Nick Cannon is and why I don't think it's wrong that Nick Cannon went on a podcast and gave his opinions, and why I do think it's wrong for the networks to pretend like they're outraged by them. So first I'm going to show you a pseudo, I don't know, rap, maybe you could call it slam poetry reading, but basically his opinions on Colin Kaepernick. This is Stand for What, and it was published. This was published on YouTube in 2017, 3 years ago.
Stand for what? You want me to stand for a song that continues to remind me of all the harms that have done us wrong? Stand for what? For your army that none of our sons truly belong? Stand for what? The 100 years it took them to convince Congress to become the anthem after 40 failed attempts? Stand for what? Your forefathers who are really just pimps? Stand for what? A song about war, not freedom. That's how you want to lead them? Brainwashing your people? That's how you want to treat them? Slave masters' whips to cops' nightsticks. That's how you continue to beat them. Stand for what? The beginning of slavery in 1619? Or the end of those black Marines of 1814? That's really what the lyrics are about. They may have taken the word slave out, but they forgot to remove the slave connotations from their brains and their mouth. The mentality to make America greater than your imagination is how you pout. Hating because we burned down.
All right, so that's I think you get the point. That's probably enough. But
to that old
I think the point is that you can see from this. I don't think Nick Cannon's not going to convince me of anything one way or the other politically. But I like the idea that he's able to say that. He should be able to support Colin Kaepernick. I think in hindsight, probably more people should have supported Colin Kaepernick, maybe in a different way than was done. The whole Kaepernick thing wasn't handled great. But anyways, Nick Cannon's never going to be the guy to convince me one way or the other on that issue. But he clearly has his opinions. That was put out in 2017. Maybe I guess you can argue that Viacom and NBC and Fox, maybe they all missed that. That's fine. But he's pretty clear in his stance of Colin Kaepernick, which particularly 3 years ago was controversial. Look how it worked for Colin Kaepernick. No matter what your thoughts are on it, if you agree with Nick Cannon or think he's a fucking moron, he makes his stance very clear on a polarizing issue. Now, that's something Ryan Seacrest and Tom Bergeron and these cornball fucking network hosts would never do. Now, I can judge them for not doing that and say, have a fucking opinion, but they like their jobs where they're not supposed to have opinions. I would equate it to pretty much any other job in America. You know, if you're just if you're an insurance salesman, your boss probably doesn't want your thoughts on Colin Kaepernick being blasted out there to the internet. So I don't think it's suppression of speech, as Steve pointed out the other day when we were arguing. I don't think it's suppression of speech for Viacom to say, hey, we don't want you to do a podcast where you're giving harsh opinions on this if you're going to host a show like Wild and Out. We'd rather you're not doing that, or we'll get someone else to host. But they didn't do that. Now, that was Nick's, I guess we'll call it rap career. Now we'll get into some of his stand-up stuff. So I will show you a clip that was posted on YouTube in 2014. This was some of Nick's stand-up about how he is a racist. The track is called I'm Racist. So let's see what Nick has to say on race relations.
Yes, I am a racist. I'll say it, yeah. So I stereotype. There's a stereotype for reasons. I'm prejudiced. All prejudice means is prejudging. Yes, I prejudge people. I do. If I meet somebody from India, I assume their house smell like curry. And it's a golden ball somewhere. Yes, I'm racist. Like even, my Asian friends, I don't let them walk my dog. Because they might walk my dog. I'm racist. I am. If I see a middle-aged white man in some sweatpants by a school, pedophile. Don't put Flat Stanley in his minivan. Racist. That's the thing, white people, y'all racist. I get it. Be upfront and out there with your racism. I'll join you. I will. Like even like what that whole Trayvon Martin thing. Yeah, I know. I get it, white people. White people, you guys are scared of young black men in black hoods.
Right.
I'm scared.
I don't even need to get. I don't need to get to the punchline. That's enough. That's enough from Nick Cannon on Trayvon Martin. You don't even need to get to the punchline. Maybe it's very funny. I don't know. But my point of showing that clip is, again, he's a guy. Well, yes, a lot of these jokes may have been hacky if Don Rickles did them in 1968. But the point is, he's attempting to be an edgy racial comedian. And he gets into the Trayvon Martin thing. Again, we forget in 2014 or whenever this was published. It was a pretty controversial issue. A lot of people were talking about that. That was a sensitive issue in this country, and Nick Cannon was talking about it. So again, if I'm NBC or I'm Viacom, I'm saying, well, if I want a host for middle America to embrace and he needs that image, then maybe I'm not going with Nick Cannon. I'm not going with a guy who does racial stand up or talks about Trayvon Martin or talks about Colin Kaepernick. So that's the point I was trying to get across, is that these networks should have known. Don't let them do a podcast. You cannot pretend all of a sudden that you're outraged when you hear Nick Cannon doing this shit, when these videos are from 2017, 2014. He has a history of that type of shit. He doesn't have a history of saying exactly what he said on, about Jews and white people on his podcast. That was such a controversy this week. So it's not exactly that, but it is controversial, quote unquote, especially now. Doesn't hold up well necessarily. He probably wouldn't tell a lot of those jokes now. And again, maybe you say, okay, I guess they missed this. They missed these videos that I found in one Google search. But what they definitely didn't miss is that he was fired from NBC in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. I might have that year wrong, but I think it was 2 years ago that he was fired from NBC for doing a bit where he gives you the letters of NBC and he uses the N-word. N-words, be careful, or something like that. Again, not a particularly funny bit. I didn't even think it was that edgy, but NBC decided, okay, that's not a family-friendly guy that we want working with a brand like America's Got Talent. Viacom knows that. Fox knows that. Everyone in fucking Hollywood knows that. Nick Cannon is a kid that grew up on all that. He's the chairman of Team Nick or something. So if you want him to be family friendly, I don't think it's an issue to tell him that. I don't think it's an issue to say you got to be one or the other. You have to be this Team Nick, AGT, Viacom representative, or you can go do your stand-up, you can do your podcast, all that type of shit. That's why at the end of the day, I can kind of understand why NBC got rid of Shane Gillis, but they hired him. That's what's wrong with these fucking networks, is they want to be edgy. They want to let Nick Cannon say whatever the fuck he wants, but then when he does, they run skit. And this last bit that I have Justin queuing up here is simply to prove that I don't support Nick Cannon as a stand-up. How could you? This I don't think was particularly controversial, although it does show, again, Nick Cannon gets into some risque topics. Oh boy, this guy's edgy. But this was more to prove that I'm not a Nick Cannon fan. I just think he should be able to say whatever the fuck he wants. But let's play Nick Cannon's bit on having good dick.
I see he's rubbing on his leg and shit. See, I know what it is. See, because it has nothing to do with money, right? You can get anybody with money. But good dick is hard to buy, and she gave me the fist bump and everything. Hey, did you put it there? That's a real nigga right there. See, look how she cheesing all hard. Sure. Because it's simple. Because you can get you a man with a good job, but do we got good dick, though? You can get you a man with some good credit, but do we got good dick, though? Shoot, you can get you a good Christian, but do we got good dick, though? Shoot, you can be a preacher in them streets, but you better be a sinner in them sheets. You know what I'm talking about. Shoot, because that's a lot of ladies in here tonight. All together, y'all got that one friend that got a man who ain't shit. She always crying and complaining. He ain't got no job. He ain't got no car. He ain't got no money. But he got good dick, though.
All right, pause it. So
that'll make this last.
This lasts for like another minute, where the punchline over and over again is he got good dick, though. You can do it. I should do that. Should be my Wilbur said. I just list off occupations. He could be a salesman. He could work at Subway and make great sandwiches. But do he got good dick, though? That's what I'm asking you, folks. But seriously, what else is in the news? So Nick Cannon, not a great comedian. I'm not a fan of his in any way. But again, do you want the face of Fox Television walking out there and saying, "Hey, hey, America, your man may have no job, but do he got that dick though?" I don't know. I don't know if that's the guy you want representing you, but you made that choice. So my problem was with the phony networks. Whoa, my goodness! I never imagined he could say anything like this. Now, none of those clips, again, none of those clips are what he said on the podcast. None of them are quite that extreme, but you can theorize, you can look at that and say, well, maybe a guy that talks about this type of shit may end up in some hot water. We'd be better off with Wayne Brady or Carson Daly or some fucking empty suit that is going to read the teleprompter and knows how to introduce your next juggling act. And the other thing is, I made some crack on Twitter. Someone was like, he's on Fox. You should expect this. So, well, Fox and Fox News are different. I believe they're still owned by the same. I think it's still Fox Corporation, but I don't believe necessarily that the same decision makers that decide to put Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson on. I don't know if they're the exact same people that put Zoe Deschanel on New Girl and Nick Cannon on The Masked Singer. I could be wrong about that, but I just think it's different. I don't think the same people that put Megyn Kelly on the air to replace Bill O'Reilly. I don't know if it's the same people that greenlit Empire. I just don't think that's the case. I could be wrong. Maybe I don't know how the TV biz works. But that's my point this week is that Nick Cannon, they should have seen it coming. And in the future, if you want Wayne Brady, hire that guy. Hire a clean-cut guy who's not going to say anything offensive. Or if you're going to hire, trying to think, if you're going to hire Jimmy Kimmel, look into his background and say, okay, he's got this stuff. We now live in a country where anything you've ever said will be held against you. No matter what, no matter how offensive you think it is or how offensive you meant it to be at the time, someone can spin it and hold it against you if you find the right people. So maybe start looking into that networks. It's the networks that should be held accountable, I think, more than Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon was just speaking his mind, no matter how idiotic it might have been. I think it's on Viacom. And I don't think they should be able to pretend, oh my goodness, we were so outraged when we saw this. Well, that was the 3 videos I played. One, I take that back. 2 searches on YouTube. Because I had to look up Nick Cannon Google and Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon stand up and Nick Cannon rap. So, seems pretty simple. If Mike Geary is able to crack the case, I think Viacom should be able to. So, like I said at the top of the show, if you got any specials or anything you want me to check out and review, feel free to hit me up at Drop the Mic YT. Make sure you follow that. And until next time, we'll see you.